Welcome to Greek mythology, the myth of Perseus. This is a story on the level of a fairy story. Hermes and Athena act the fairy godmother in Cinderella. The magical wallet and cup belong to the properties fairy tales abound in everywhere. It is the only myth in which magic plays a decisive part, and it seems to have been a great favorite in Greece. King Acacius of Argos had only one child, a daughter, Danae. She was beautiful above all the other women of the land, but this was small comfort to the king for not having a son. He journeyed to the Delphi to ask the god if there was any hope that someday he would be the father of a boy. The priestess told him no, and added what was far worse, that his daughter would have a son who would kill him. The only sure way to escape that fate was for the king to have Danae instantly put to death. His fatherly affection was not strong, as events proved, but his fear of the gods was. They visited with terrible punishment those who shed the blood of kindred. Acacius did not dare slay his daughter. Instead, he had a house built all of bronze and sunk underground, but with part of the roof open to the sky so that the light and air could come through. Here he shut her up and guarded her. As she sat there through the long days and hours with nothing to do, nothing to see except the clouds moving by overhead, a mysterious thing happened. A shower of gold fell from the sky and filled her chamber. How it was revealed to her that it was Zeus who had visited her in this shape, we are not told, but she knew that the child she bore was his son. For a time she kept his birth secret from her father, and finally one day, the little boy, his name was Perseus, was discovered by his grandfather. "Your child!" Acacius cried in great anger. "Who is his father?" But when Danae answered proudly, "Zeus," he would not believe her. One thing only he was sure of, that the boy's life was a terrible danger to his own, but if he could not kill them outright, he could put them in the way of tolerably certain death. He had a great chest made, and the two placed in it. Then it was taken out to sea and cast into the water. In that strange boat Danae sat with her little son. The daylight faded, and she was alone on the sea. When in the carven chest the winds and waves struck fear into her heart, she put her arms, not without tears, round Perseus tenderly. She said, "O son, what grief is mine!" They had made land. They were safe from the sea, but they were still in the chest, with no way to get out. Fate willed it, or perhaps Zeus, who up to now had done little for his love and his child, that they should be discovered by a good man, a fisherman named Dictys. He came upon the great box and broke it open and took the pitiful cargo home to his wife, who was as kind as he. They had no child, and they cared for Danae and Perseus as if they were their own. The two lived there many years. Danae, content to let her son follow the fisherman's humble trade, out of harm's way, but in the end more trouble came. Polydites, the ruler of the little island, was the brother of Dictys, but he was a cruel and ruthless man. He seems to have taken no notice of the mother and son for a long time, but at last Danae attracted his attention. She was still radiantly beautiful, even though Perseus by now was full grown, and Polydices fell in love with her. He wanted her, but he did not want her son, and he set himself to think out a way of getting rid of him. There were some fearsome monsters called Gorgons who lived on an island and were known far and wide because of their deadly power. Polydices eventually talked to Perseus about them. He probably told him that he would rather have the head of one of them than anything else in the world. This seems practically certain from the plan he devised for killing Perseus. He announced that he was about to be married, and he called his friends together for a celebration, including Perseus in the invitation. Each guest has a customary brought a gift for the bride-to-be, except Perseus alone. He had nothing he could give. He was young and proud and keenly mortified. He stood up before them all and did exactly what the king had hoped he would do, declared he would give him a present better than any there. he would go off and kill Medusa and bring back her head as his gift. Nothing could have suited the king better. No one in his senses would have made such a proposal. Medusa was one of the Gorgons, for the reason that whoever looked at them was turned instantly into stone. Two great gods watching over him. He took ship as soon as he left the king's hall, not daring to see his mother first and tell her what he intended, and he sailed to Greece to learn where the three monsters were found. He went to Delphi and Dodona, but they did not know where the Gorgons lived. When and how Hermes and Athena came to his help is not told him in story, but he must have known despair before they did so. At last, however, as he wandered on, he met Hermes, the guide and the giver of good. This radiant personage told him that before he attacked Medusa, he must first be properly equipped, and that what he needed was in the possession of the nymphs of the north. To find the nymphs' abode, they must go to the Grey Woman who alone could tell them the way. These women dwelt in a land where all was dim and shrouded in twilight. No ray of sun looked ever on that country, nor the moon by night. In a grey place the three women lived, all grey themselves and withered, as in extreme old age. They were strange creatures indeed, most of all because they had but one eye from the three, which it was their custom to take turns with, each removing it from her forehead when she had it for a time and handing it to another. All this Hermes told Perseus, and then he unfolded his plan. He would himself guide Perseus to them. Once there, Perseus must keep hidden until he saw one of them take the eye out of her forehead to pass it on. At that moment, when none of the three could see, he must rush forward and seize the eye and refuse to give it back until they told him how to reach the nymphs of the north. He himself, Hermes said, would give him a sword to attack Medusa with, which could not be bent or broken by the Gorgon's scales. But another great deity was at hand to help. Pallas Athena stood beside Perseus. She took off the shield of polished bronze which covered her breast and held it out to him. "Look into this when you attack the Gorgon," she said. "You will be able to see her in it as in a mirror, and so avoid her deadly power." Now, indeed, Perseus had good reasons to hope. The journey to the Twilight Land was long over the stream of ocean, and unto the very border of the Black Country, where the Cimmerians dwelled. But Hermes was his guide, and he could not go astray. They found the Grey Woman at last, looking in the wavering light like grey birds, for they had the shape of swans. But their heads were human, and beneath their wings they had arms and hands. Perseus did just as Hermes had said. He held back until he saw one of them take the eye out of her forehead. Then before she could give it to her sister, snatch it out of her hand. It was a moment or two before the three realized they had lost it. Each thought one of the others had it, but Perseus spoke out and told them he had taken it, and that it would be theirs again only when they showed him how to find the nymphs of the north. They gave him full directions at once. They would have done anything to get their eye back. He returned it to them and went on the way they had pointed out to him. Perseus had Hermes with him, so that the road lay open to him, and he reached the host of happy people who are always banqueting and holding joyful revelry. They showed him their great kindness. They welcomed him to their feast, and maidens dancing to the sound of flute and lyre paused to get for him the gifts he sought. These were three winged sandals, a magic wallet, which would always become the right seize for whatever was to be carried in it, and most important of all, a cap which made the wearer invisible. With this and Athena's shield and Hermes' sword, Perseus was ready for the Gorgons. Hermes knew where they lived, and leaving the happy land, the two flew back across ocean and over the sea to the terrible sisters' island. By great good fortune, they were all asleep when Perseus found them. In the mirror of the bright shield he could see them clearly. Creatures with great wings and bodies covered with golden scales and hair, a mass of twisting snakes. Athena was beside him now as well as Hermes. They told him which one was Medusa, and that was important, for she alone of the three could be killed. The other two were immortal. Perseus and his winged sandals hovered above them, looking however only at the shield. Then he aimed a stroke down at Medusa's throat, and Athena guided his hand. With a single sweep of his sword, and he cut through her neck, and his eyes still fixed on the shield, could never glance at her. He swooped low enough to seize the head. He dropped it into the wallet which closed around it. He had nothing to fear from it now, but two other Gorgons had awakened, and horrified at the sight of their sister slain, tried to pursue the slain. Perseus has saved. He had on the cap of darkness, and they could not find him. On his way back, he came to Ethiopia and alighted there. By this time, Hermes had left him. Perseus found, as Hercules was later to find, that a lovely maiden had been given up to be devoured by a horrible sea serpent. Her name was Andromeda, and she was the daughter of a silly vain woman. In this case, the punishment for the arrogance the gods detested fell not on Queen Cassiopeia and Andromeda's mother, but on her daughter. The Ethiopians were being devoured in numbers by the serpent, and learning from their oracle that they could be freed from the pest only if Andromeda were offered up to it. They forced Cepheus, her father, to consent. When Perseus arrived, the maiden was on a rocky ledge by the sea, changed there to wait for the coming of the monster. Perseus saw her and on the instant loved her. He waited beside her until the great snake came for its prey. Then he cut its head off just as he had the Gorgons. The headless body dropped back into the water. Perseus took Andromeda to her parents and asked for her hand, which they gladly gave him. With her, he sailed back to the island and his mother, but in the house where he had lived so long and he found no one. The fisherman Dictys' wife was long since dead, and the two others, Danae and the man who had been like a father to Perseus, had to fly and hide himself from Polyphemus, who was furious at Danae's refusal to marry him. They had taken refuge in the temple, Perseus was told. He learned also that the king was holding a banquet in the palace, and all the men who favored him were gathered there. Perseus instantly saw his opportunity. He went straight to the palace and entered the hall. As he stood at its entrance, Athena's shining buckler on his breast, the silver wallet at his side, he drew the eyes of every man there. Then before any could look away, he held up the Gorgon's head, and at the sight, one and all, the cruel king and his servile courtiers were turned into stone. There they sat, a row of statues, each, as it were, frozen stiff in his attitude he had struck when he first saw Perseus. When the islanders know themselves freed from the tyrant, it was easy for Perseus to find Danae and Dictys. He made Dictys king of the island, but he and his mother decided that they would go back with Andromeda to Greece and try to be reconciled to Achilles, to see if the many years that had passed since he had put them in the chest had not softened him so that he would be glad to receive his daughter and grandson. When they reached Argos, however, they found that Achilles had been driven away from the city, and where he was no one could save. It happened that soon after their arrival, Perseus heard that the king of Larissa in the north was holding a great athletic contest, and he journeyed there to take part. In the discus throwing, when his turn came and he hurled the heavy missile, it swerved and fell among the spectators. Achilles was there on a visit to the king, and the discus struck him. The blow was fatal and he died at once. So Apollo's oracle was again proved true. Perseus felt any grief. At least he knew that his grandfather had done his best to kill him and his mother. With his death, their troubles came to an end. Perseus and Andromeda lived happily ever after. Their son Electron was the grandfather of Hercules. Medusa's head was given to Athena, who bore it always upon her aegis. Zeus' shield, which